The hybrid work model is here to stay. That's what we heard at the most recent NACS State of the Industry Summit. Today, we're going to talk about what does that mean for retailers and how you need to change your offer to attract regular commuters and those who are irregular commuters. Joining us today for our conversation is our regular pollster and all things analyzing numbers, Adam Rosenblatt. He's with Bold Decision, and you have been our polling and analysis firm of choice for a long time now. So welcome back.
Yeah, great to be on, especially breaking a new set of into the 500s now on the podcast.
Yes, episode 501. So on our way to 1,000. So what we want to talk about today is I had mentioned the idea of commuters. Now we know from this survey that we did, we what we want to do is we know that there are different types of workers out there. There are people that work at home all the time. There are people that work at home some of the time, and then there are people who drive every day. And we wanted to better understand the dynamic of where each of these people's heads were at and where their wallets may be, so that retailers can take advantage or look at how people are thinking and modify offers when appropriate for stores to see how they can attract the most of each of those groups. One of the first things that we asked in this survey, where we talked about commuting, is 68% of people who had jobs that responded to this in this national survey said they are daily commuters. So roughly 2/3 get in the car every day and they go to work. Maybe some take public transport. 32%, the remaining 32%, are hybrid or total work from home, meaning that somewhere less than 5 days a week is when they're commuting. And that's where I think we start to see some changes in how people think and how people act. So just set it up, Adam. What are things that retailers might want to think about with these two groups of customers? I think one thing we found is daily customers are a little bit more concerned about their cash.
Yeah, so one of the cool things that you hit on is that not everybody who walks into the store is even working, right? There's a huge chunk of people who are either retired, they're students, they're homemakers, there's all different types of people. So we don't necessarily even realize that when we just think about the average person. Only sort of 2/3 of the average person in America is actually working full time or part time. So that's something fascinating to think about right off the bat. But what we dived into is when we look at that essentially 2/3 who are working, how many are working the classic job that we usually think about when we think of commuters? Going into the office every single day or going into wherever their workplace is. A lot of times it's not an office. But it's 2/3, 68% who commute every single day. And then 32% is the balance, either a few times a week, less than once a week, or there's actually 13% in the realm of people who work, 13% who are exclusively working remotely or at home. If we had gone back to when we first started doing NACS surveys long ago, we would say, like, wait, how could that be? There's that many people, the internet, technology, something changed so much that, 13% of people have jobs that they work from home. The obvious thing when we look right now and sit in 2025 and we say, wait, it was the pandemic, right? So
Right.
that changed a lot of not just who's working in the in the workforce, but also where they work. And it actually had a ripple effect for a lot of people on whether or not their lives have gone back to normal or not since then. The commuters, their lives have gone back to normal, but a lot of these people who are in this new normal that they work from home, that's the new reality for millions and millions of people.
And when we put together this survey, we wanted to look at how does it affect retailers? And one of the things that we constantly get out of surveys that we do with Bold Decision is we ask when do you buy gas? When do you prefer meals? Things like that. More people are, in general, if you look at the bulk, the national average, more people fill up at lunchtime than any other time. But when you look at the data and you compare consumer or commuters versus those who are hybrid or work at home, you start to see different patterns emerge where those who are hybrid remote are more likely to consider lunch their main meal as opposed to those who commute. And those who commute are more likely to see breakfast as a main meal. Not, and of course, dinner is more than 50% across all, but commuters are more likely to think of breakfast as a big meal. Stay at home or partially stay at home are more likely to think of lunch as a main meal. So there's a first kind of aha in how do you serve different types of workers.
Exactly. They're all, as you said, they're all generally having the same number of dinners. There's definitely a difference between breakfast and lunch. But the other thing, too, I think you're the one who sort of pointed out that they have access to a fridge. Those who are actually working from home, yes, they're working from home, but they're also pretty close to their kitchen a lot of times. And they tend to actually be having more meals on any given day on average than the average American or the average commuter. So that's another piece too. Again, it's a complex situation when we think about a convenience store because they're not going to necessarily walk out of their house to go and get a convenience store. But maybe it means that when they're at the convenience store, they'll fill up on snacks or other things that will be for later for those extra meals, even though they're not necessarily going out of the house multiple times a day, the way that somebody commuting has to go to wherever they're commuting and back from wherever they're commuting. And if they're commuting and they're at a job site or an office or whatever, they might be going out for lunch. They might be going out to other places, which is also something to do.
And as part of looking at our survey, uh, we looked at the dinner customer and we found that those who are either remote or hybrid are more likely to eat dinner out. And I thought that was pretty interesting. It was what 11% of commuters say they eat dinner out, 18, and this is outside of the weekends. This is just during work week, and 18% of hybrid and remote workers. So not quite double as many, but that's a pretty different number in terms of how they act.
It is, and I think it's heavily related. Even though the data doesn't bear it out, I think story wise, it's heavily related to what's going on at lunchtime because the commuters are way more likely to be eating lunch out. So almost half of commuters, 48%, are eating lunch out on any given weekday. The hybrid people, the remote people, they're only 29%. So about 1 in 3, or even less than 1 in 3, maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 3 are actually bothering to go out of their house or their occasional place where they're working from that's not an office. Whereas you have half of people literally taking a conventional lunch break. So when you think about that and you think about the economy, right, we think about costs of literally the cost of eating out and all those types of things. I think what's happening is they're cannibalizing their own lunch money, literally, right? They're eating their lunch money or they're eating potentially their dinner money at lunchtime if they're a commuter. And the hybrid remote people who are, happy to stay home, they maybe don't need to take a break because they're already working from home. Maybe they're a little bit more likely to go out at dinner time. The problem, I think, when we think about it for retailers is they're not going out for dinner at the same rate that we're seeing people going out for lunch. It's still small. And same with breakfast. There's absolutely, without a doubt, a crowd that goes in for breakfast out of the house every single day, but those are relatively small amounts, whether it's for the commuter or for the hybrid folks.
Another interesting component that we tested is we asked people about how they feel about the healthy options or the ability to find healthier items. And first off, I should mention more information about this is in the latest issue of NACS magazine, the July issue of NACS magazine. You can either see it at nacsmagazine.com or in your mailbox in actual print piece. And if you don't get it, you can always go there and sign up for it for free. And we will have future findings from at least 3 more surveys coming out over the coming months diving into different things. And one of the things is looking at healthier options. But we also want to touch upon it here in terms of looking at what's the difference between commuters and in hybrid remote workers in terms of how do they think about healthier options. And commuters are slightly more likely to say, yeah, I should be eating healthier. So that is a possible opportunity to tell a story to commuters as long as it feels like a good story to them.
Yeah, this is a cool question that we asked because we had to ask it in a socially acceptable way, right? Nobody really wants to go and say that they're really, really unhealthy. Some will if we ask it that way, and we have asked it in the past. But on this one, the way that we posited the question was if you had to choose which comes closest to your view, most days I eat about what I should, or most days I should probably be eating better. And the commuters, by essentially a 10-point margin, said, yeah, I should probably be eating healthier. They said 55 to 45, I should probably be eating healthier. The hybrid remote people, again, maybe they have access to healthier options or fresher options or other things, whatever it is that they consider healthier to be, or what they should. Because again, we didn't even necessarily use that word to say, yeah, I eat super healthy, I've got a great diet, but by a 4-point margin. So 52 to 48, they said most days I eat about what I should rather than I should be eating healthier. So again, it's not great, right? It's not like it's a 70 to 30 margin where, oh my God, look at all these wonderful, healthy, fit people who are doing all the right things, which even that would maybe be a 90-10 margin. But it does tilt that way. So I think there is also, when we think about the retailer, there's opportunity potentially because cognitively the commuters a little bit no by like a 10-point margin they're tilting a little bit more towards like, yeah, maybe I need that little nudge that says you should be eating healthier, here's a healthier option for you. Because they already, if we think of it in a room of 100 people, 55 of them are sort of saying, yeah, I should probably be eating healthier. And that, not sound too rude or ridiculous, but that would be tipping the scales a little bit if the scale's tipping towards the 55 side of that. So there's a good opportunity. And again, they're there. We already know they're out more often, they're shopping more often. And again, this is the realm of people working. So they do have income, they do have money to spend on things.
So what this isn't in the July issue, but it's one of the surveys that'll be coming out in a future issue. So if you're looking at the July issue, don't say, well, that's not in there. But we we continue this healthier eating conversation in a future article that is being edited and will be in a NACS magazine down the road. What we asked non-commuter or hybrid, it just flat out, do you change your behavior by day of the week? Because we've often heard that some people tend to eat healthier in the beginning of the week, and then as the week bears down on them, they feel they need a more of a break. Think back to McDonald's ads, "You deserve a break today." That probably is something that would play on a Friday in terms of messaging. But thinking about specifically about the hybrid commuter, generally when you see people are either going to the office or not going to the office, and it's some sort of split, you see the 2 days that are most likely to be at home is Monday and Friday. That just feels more weekend like to a lot of people, and that's what you see on the roads, and that's what a lot of office occupancy experts see when they look at vacancy or non-vacancy rates. So there could be an opportunity to message to those who are at home on those Mondays and Fridays. Monday could be, hey, start off your week right with something healthy. Friday could be, hey, you deserve a break. Here's what we have in mind for you. So I thought that was combining these series of articles was another fairly illuminating observation about how retailers could go to market.
Yeah, and there's opportunity because we see a lot of people, not shockingly, a lot of people say, for the most part, they have the same attitudes or the same habits really when they eat. most of the time. But there's about a third of people who have a varied diet, who are open to changing things. So there is ways to break that. I think we've helped identify who some of those are. There's even a good chunk of those who are with the commuters, because again, maybe they're getting bored. I'm just hypothesizing beyond the survey here, but maybe they're getting bored of driving to work the same way every single day. Right? Or they're, even if they're using a GPS and it directs them down a different street rather than something else, there is a minor opportunity for excitement or change or difference in their life by going into a convenience store and saying, "Oh, look at this new candy bar. I didn't know about this new." I was joking, called snacking innovations, right? But like something new from a drink standpoint of, oh, I never knew that this type of drink now has this flavor. Let me try it. So it's minor things. Again, maybe they'll like it, maybe they won't. If they like it, then guess what? It becomes a habit for them. But there's a good chunk of people who are open to this type of change. And I think or type of change, and it's a little bit more enticing for the commuters because of the fact that they don't have that much variability in their life. But on the opposite direction, the hybrid people who are not getting that variability in their life as well, who are working from home, who are saying, you know what, I'm not going out for lunch. I'm a little bit more excited to go out for dinner. I'm a little bit more excited to try something different. There's opportunity with them too. So I wouldn't write off either one of these groups. There's just slightly different ways that I think you can appeal to both of them.
One of the interesting charts that we asked, okay, there's 3 meals that people typically eat in a day: breakfast, lunch, dinner. When do you have meals? And of course, you could pick more than 3 or less than 3. But when you lay it out as a chart, you see there's a spike for breakfast, a spike for lunch, a spike for dinner. But those spikes vary based on whether you're a commuter or whether you're at home or some version of commuter or at home. You want to it's difficult to explain in a podcast because it's visual, but can you describe what these spikes look like and how they're a little bit different?
Yeah, so what we typically see, and this wouldn't be shocking, is the overwhelming majority of people are having breakfast between the 6 a.m. and the 11 a.m. hours, right? And that's, I think of the old jokes. I think it's the movie Big Daddy, where he goes in and he tries to order breakfast outside of breakfast hours and gets yelled at. But that's typically where the breakfast hour is. For most people, the overwhelming on lunchtime, it's between 11 and 2, even even with how people have their varied life. um, Dinner actually also has like a 3 hour window for the most part, so like 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock is when most people have dinner. So one of the neat kind of things with this, again, we are typically, when we talk about these things, we're talking about the average person. You're envisioning the average person who works whatever 9 to 5, 9 to 6, but right, they get out earlier to get to work. They have to have time to get back from work. But there's a lot of people who don't fit that mold, right? There's people who are working third shift, fourth shift, all these other shifts, right? So those types of jobs, those people are eating at different hours. I think it's one of the reasons why we also see a wider window for breakfast than we do for lunch. Most people, even the people who are serving the lunches, they have to have lunch at some time. But the breakfast window is a bit wider, and the lunch or the dinner window also. Eventually, most people go to sleep, so the
Mhm.
window does cut off, and we do see a few people are having dinner at 11 o'clock at night. But the breakfast window is an interesting thing because I think, again, thinking about the retailers, there's opportunity to market breakfast in different ways. Breakfast means different things to different people. Some people, and we've seen this and looked at it before in other past surveys, sometimes breakfast is literally a liquid breakfast, right? It's a yogurt, it's a shake. Other people, it's just going to be a bagel on the go. Others, it's going to be, a full hearty meal, or I want to sit down, I want to have pancakes, I want to have eggs, I want to have sausage. So it can be any of those. It could be, for certain people, it's multiple meals, right? One could be
Hmm.
the first breakfast, and if you're like a hobbit, it's the second breakfast, right? So there's other opportunities here. And again, from a convenience retailer standpoint, if you have a way to actually sell that second breakfast at that same time as they buy the first one, great. They can have it for lunch and again, cannibalize it as their lunch and then go back out for lunch if they're a commuter. It's going to be a little bit trickier though for the remote workers because they're not going out as often.
So it's not every day that you talk about consumer surveys and you mention The Hobbit and Adam Sandler. So well done. But thinking a little bit more about the breakfast window, if you will, um, the people who are commuting tend to be on the earlier end of that because they're going into work, and those who are um, working from home tend to be on the later end of that breakfast hour. Then over lunch, it's pretty much spikes at that noon to one time frame. The work from home has a little wider peak or spike because they may be starting a little earlier, a little later, because they may not face some of those same constraints of being in the office when certain people go to certain places. But what also was I thought illuminating for the folks who are working from home or remote is they have dinner between 5 and 6. I mean, it's a big spike, and with a commuter, it tends to be between 6 and 7 because of the time spent commuting and then maybe time having to prepare or just waiting for everybody to get home if there's multiple people that are commuting. But for those who work from home, 5 to 6. So it is pretty pronounced. And just mentioning that, just for different ways, how do you message people? How do you talk to people? And I don't necessarily mean in store, although that's one possibility. Is there an app? Is there some other way to market, to tell people, you get them? And surveys like this is a great way to share what we know about people so retailers can get them more. Um, what would you say, Adam, is basically the big takeaway or two or three for retailers in looking about commuters?
It's a really good question. There's a variety of things that we see that are sharp differences between the commuters and the non-commuters. One of the things is that they're going to the stores more often and going out to eat more often if they're a remote worker because of the fact that they're not necessarily getting that interaction. If they're not a physical human interaction, right? Maybe they're talking to people on the computer or doing whatever they're doing, presumably on a computer if they're working remotely. But if they're going into a workplace, if they're going into a job site, if they're going into an office, they're probably getting more interaction with folks. So there's opportunity from the stores to engage with people. We've said it in the past, I know on this podcast too. Sometimes for many people, the convenience store is the only opportunity that they have to interact with somebody. Particularly when we're talking about the people who are working the non-conventional hours, right? In the middle of the night, it could be the first person they talk to in the day. It could be the last person they're talking to the day. Because again, when we think about our mental model of the average customer, right? Maybe we're thinking of somebody in their 40s who's married and has kids or whatever, but there's a lot of people who don't have those characteristics that don't fit that mold, right? They could be a lot older and living alone. They could be a lot younger and living alone. So some of that interaction is just as valuable to the customer as much as the actual items they're buying. The other piece too that I think is an interesting finding that we didn't touch on is concern about their finances. This is something that we actually asked in the survey, looking about stresses that people had, people's concerns about their overall health, concerns about their personal safety. There wasn't really any difference between personal health or personal safety concerns, but stress over their finances. There was a 10-point increase, a 10-point stronger response of people saying, I'm worried about my finances all the time if they are a commuter, right? And maybe that's because that's why they're having a commute, right? The other folks too. Again, keep in mind both of these are employed, right? There's commuters
Hmm.
and the non-commuters, but the commuters were much more worried. Again, obviously they have the costs of commuting built into their finances, but I don't think that accounts for a 10% increase. So they have other stresses going on. Maybe they're a little bit more strapped for cash. and being a little bit tighter on what they want to spend. So there's also opportunity, I think, to give them more value, particularly if they're going into a convenience store, right? They might know that they're paying a little bit more potentially for the convenience that they're getting. But we already know that they're stressed. Even if they're not more stressed about their health, they're not more stressed about their physical safety. They're stressed over finances. So being able to reduce their stress in some way. And again, we also know they're a little bit like 10 points or 10 pounds more worried about their health in terms of eating right and making the right decisions. So I think if you can bring those two things together, you can really reach them with a good opportunity to save money and maybe occasionally make a healthier decision in their choices when they're at the stores.
And if it food is a social event for many people, and just what we talk about food and what they come to eat, but it's also what is that social occasion. Do you have that friendly customer service experience, whatever it is associated with food? It can be the best food in the world, but a lousy restaurant in terms of how it feels, and you're not going to go back. So I think that's a great point that you raised, Adam, that it is all about addressing people's feelings. 10.37 to 27, commuters are concerned about their finances. It's a smile, a deal, a value, some sort of communications can not make their concerns go away, but at least can make you the place of choice when they want something. So much more in the July issue of NACS magazine on commuters versus hybrid and remote, and much more over the next couple months. Look for at least 3 more articles between now and probably the October issue, and looking at various things. How do you get people to the pump? How do you get people from the pump to inside the store? And how do people think about the whole C-store experience? So look for much more, and we'll be talking against Adam. We'll be talking again, Adam, not against Adam. Again soon. So thanks again for joining us.
Thanks.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.